to actually do this. Right. So thanks for coming in the latest of webinars to launch my new book, Taste at the TV Chef, How Storytelling Can Save the Planet. And we're discussing some of the big issues in food that the book explores. My book is all about TV chefs, how and why they taught us to cook and eat 20 years ago, back when Britain had lost its way to the dinner table. I asked the people who made those programs and who starred in them how they did it, and as we hurtle towards a climate emergency, what harnessing the power of that level of storytelling can do to save the planet. We've already talked about the role of influencers with Melissa Hensley, Thomasina Myers, Compassion in World Farming's CEO, Philip Limbury, and the Food Foundation's Joe Ralling, who is currently working on Marcus Rashford's campaign to end child food poverty. And we've discussed the future of food with old school landowners and cool young farmers in Saving Our Soil. And you can watch both of those discussions on gillysmith.com. But today we are talking TV chefs, then, now, and should be, and their power to change the way we eat. No pressure, guys. But who watches telly anymore? And in a culture of waste and excess, which will bring down modern civilization as we know it, how can it change the national conversation? Today's panel is made up of people who have been, are now, or should be on telly. Environmentalist James Strawbridge is a seasoned TV presenter, mostly with his dad, Escape to the Chateau's Dick Strawbridge. Their show, It's Not Easy Being Green, first broadcast in 2006, was way ahead of its time. Olia Hercules has been a guest on Saturday Kitchen and Sunday Brunch, and Romy Gill is a presenter on the recently revived Ready Steady Cook. Rukmini Iyer hasn't been on TV yet, as far as I know, but is the 5th best-selling food writer after the pinch of noms, Jamie Oliver, Mary Berry, and Joe Wicks. Eco-chef Tom Hunt has been on Sky News and BBC News, but not on mainstream food TV. Why? Now, each one of you, I'm going to come to James first. I want each one of you to tell me your TV chef and what you learned from TV. James, who's your favourite TV chef?
Well, it's funny. It's two really, which I'm not sure if I'm allowed, but it was Jamie Oliver. Obviously, grew up watching him being a bit disruptive with encouraging young people to cook without always following the recipe exactly. And then the other one, which is a bit different, is sort of he's not really a TV chef, but it was Bruce Parry from Tribe. I think it was like, and what he did, he ate weird stuff around the world and really got involved in cultures and communities. And I sort of took that approach into food, where if you travel somewhere or where you're living, I liked the idea of, and it's a bit like Jamie does with his Italian programs, really immersing yourself in local ingredients and local cultures around food. So yeah, mainly Jamie Oliver though. Like I think it's almost uncool because he's so popular, but he was a massive influence as I was growing up.
He was, and only 6 years later, you were on telly yourself with your dad doing It's Not Easy Being Green. Tell us about the experience of doing that. I know it wasn't terribly easy for you at first. Why first?
Well, it was my first job. I did sort of environmental history at uni, and I was working as a chef to fill my days because it wasn't that much uni time. So I was cooking, and then we started filming for BBC Two 3 series revolving around going self-sufficient as we could in Cornwall. Building water wheels, growing our own food, curing our own pigs. I was naturally quite shy at that time and didn't enjoy cameras, but because it was an ob doc, it meant the camera crew lived with us, and they were really lovely team out of BBC Bristol. So we got on really well, and that broke down that sort of the barrier to being yourself a little bit. And then from there ended up doing quite a lot more television over the years. And it's always been a lot of fun, actually. Yeah.
Did you get any sense that it was actually making an impact? Did you get the kind of feedback that made you think this is worthwhile?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, starting off, we were doing, back, you mentioned, I didn't realize it was that long, 2006, doing sustainable living. That was greeted with lots of emails, lots of guest appearances, being a wormery expert on Richard and Judy or Paul O'Grady show, kind of just like popular in a hippie-ish kind of way. It's become more and more mainstream, which is great. And I think the link with publishing is really important, because very often a TV chef or series will then have a TV tie-in book. We didn't quite go down that route. We went down practical books, teaching people how to do, charcuterie or renewable energy or food. So it's kind of made quite a big impact with some people. So, and that's also, I think, internationally, TV from the UK, it's a bit like our patents and inventive kind of culture. Television formats are really innovative here, and they get sold in territories around the world. So I was dubbed in Venezuelan. I had mates in New Zealand who were watching the shows. So it did have quite a big reach, which nowadays social media, again, is like an instant form of global reach. So yeah, I hope it's made a bit of a difference, but very much wasn't about trying to convince people necessarily at the time. It was more about following what we were doing and take it or leave it in a way.
Yeah. I mean, two things there. One, it's really important to remember that format. And I do use that as an example in the book, sort of unpacking MasterChef, but also telling the story, the extraordinary story of the copycat Jamie Olivers. Because when Jamie Oliver, he didn't just, teach us how to eat in the UK, but actually there's amazing stories of bringing food back to Hungary, post-socialist Hungary, following the Jamie Oliver kind of format. It was really extraordinary. So those ideas really travel and they really sell. And the BBC has always really been very well known for that. The other thing about you, James, is the authenticity. We know that you actually did grow up like that. You were the perfect presenter. And of course, your dad is quirky, kooky Dick Strawbridge from Escape to the Chateau fame now, but really did bring you up like that. How important was it to the commissioning process that you actually were the real deal?
Yeah, I think in sort of the last decade, it's become really important. What commissioners seem to say they want is people who are experts and or living it for real, and the age of constructing a narrative just for a TV commission doesn't seem to work as well. It still happens, I think, quite a lot, but it's very much how I live, the stuff with TV. But that said, I've done formatted shows where like 50-hour-long daytime episodes sailing around and meeting people, and I would never have done that if it wasn't for TV. But I still felt that I was not. They tried to script banter, for example. You can't if you see brackets banter and it's like your father and son, it's like it's a bit ludicrous. So generally I've always tried to be myself on telly, and I think if you're passionate about what you're talking to people, whether it's cheese making or a mussel farm, it's going to come across as I do live on the river near mussels, and I make cheese in my spare time. So it's kind of, you can't really fake that, I don't think.
And it's interesting, the story that Jamie Oliver or Pat Llewellyn told me about Jamie Oliver, when they first started making The Naked Chef, it really was him in his chef whites, using, kitchen French. And it was Pat Llewellyn who said, this isn't working. And she had to get permission to dump £60,000 worth of that pilot, took the camera off the legs, did that, posh Pat and the cheeky chappy banter, and lo, it was born. And something like that, and I'll talk to each one of you who has tried telly about how terrifying that sort of piece to camera is, that sort of freeze in front of the camera. I know that some of you have found that really hard. Olia is smiling in recognition. So James, you're currently pitching. You don't have to tell us what it is, but is it along the lines of the Artisan Kitchen? Are you staying true to what you are putting out in the world?
Yeah, very much so. So basically, I've come up with all sorts of bonkers ideas over the years, like everything. I went on honeymoon in a gypsy caravan, and I thought this would make a really good TV show. Pitched it, and then coming up with fun stuff is an interesting angle. But now what I do is I just kind of present myself and then say sort of bit more take it or leave it, as this is what I'm doing. But that said, I mean, if I'm honest, like my dad and Angela, they've got this show, successful Channel 4 series. They've just started doing their own production. So they're co-producing ideas. So I'm working, obviously I've appeared on his show, worked with them for years. So for me now, it's almost coming up with an idea that I know someone could help make, but equally my agent and stuff would talk to TV companies and say, hey, like, this is James, he's into this, this, and this. And then if there's a show where I'd fit, that would be great. But I'm no longer searching for TV because I'm happy doing what I do, which I think almost makes you more attractive sometimes. It's like the thing, whereas I spent so many years traveling up and down on the train to London, pitching ideas and shaving and wearing as fancy clothes as I could. And it never really felt, like that was me. So now it's a little bit easier being stuck down in Cornwall. And then if something comes up, that would be great. But it's almost, not chasing it at the moment actively.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the leverage of the Escape to the Chateau will allow your eco ideas to kind of get a new audience completely. So that's great. Tom, let's go to you. As somebody who is also an eco chef, you are extremely well known and you are the authority in so many different spaces, largely because of the work that you've done with Dan Barber and his Selfridges residency, Wasted, with Michelin-starred chefs, Alain Ducasse, Raymond Blanc, Fergus Henderson. You're in that world, very, very well known. Tell us about being on telly.
Well, over the years, I've kind of been a go-to for Sky News and a couple of other channels when they have a story on waste. I think the first time was in 2011 when I was creating a food waste banquet where we turned FareShare's warehouse into a big kind of restaurant space for the weekend. And yeah, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, I was petrified the first time I went up to the Sky News offices and had to go on, and it was, but somehow I managed to get through it. And since then I've done bits and bobs basically. I've mainly, James Martin a few times. First time in 2014 with the publication of my first book, The Natural Cook, and then much more recently, a few months ago when Eating for Pleasure, People and Planet came out. And then actually I was down there just a week or two ago recording as well.
That's Saturday Kitchen.
Yeah, well, no, actually it's James Martin's kind of shifted, hasn't he, to his own kind of new program, Saturday Morning.
Okay.
James Martin's Saturday Morning.
Okay, and that's a very, very sort of high profile. In the book, it's called Dude Food. It was created in America. It was hilarious conversations with the producers of those television programs. And they say that it is for dads who are in charge of the kids with a hangover. So they just lie on the sofa watching telly food and the kids are climbing all over them. Job done. Were you able to talk about waste and eco food, sort of local sourcing, your relationship with your farmer? Can you do that on prime time Saturday morning television?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Actually, the first time I went on in 2014, James Martin was actually just, not into what I was talking about at all and just taking the mickey out of me off camera, basically. But this time going back in, it all changed. Authentically, he was very interested in the whole kind of idea of, bringing sustainability into the kitchen and how that can be done. And that's actually why they asked me on. I got an email from the producers saying, hey, we're getting dozens of these letters asking how we can eat better for the environment. And so we'd love you to come on and talk. And it just so happened that my book was also coming out at the same time, which obviously gets kind of set the stage for me to discuss that and my ideas around sustainable cooking. And so, and then more recently so they asked me back. So 3 months later, I just kind of went in the other day and it was just brilliant. There was every opportunity to discuss these things. It's really what people want to hear about now.
Great, that's fantastic news. So when you're talking to the producers, the researchers, for example, because you start off with the researchers, don't you? They ring you up and they say, tell me about this, we want to do this. Do you get a sense that they are really up to speed on the issues?
Yeah, I think, I got that impression, certainly. Another bit of TV I've done recently was for Central News Asia. I was asked to present a little segment on better farming. And it was the research was very, very thorough and very up to date. And I was really impressed, actually.
Well, you'd expect it on the news. You wouldn't necessarily expect it on Saturday morning television. I mean, seriously.
Yeah. So, when it came to Saturday, James Martin's Saturday morning program, they were very open. I think that, they invited me on as the expert to bring that knowledge. And so I contributed a lot pre-show to discussing what we might talk about.
Yeah.
But James Martin also is very casual, and the conversation will just go wherever it goes. It's kind of filmed as if it's live, even though it's not.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'll be interesting talking to Romy, actually, when we get to you, Romy, you know, about sort of how much of a part of the national conversation, you know, ethically sourced, high welfare, you know, local food is part of something like Ready, Steady, Cook as well. But we'll come to that later. Tom, if you could pitch your perfect program, the program that you're all about. There are television producers watching this now. What would you want to see on television?
Talk about putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, I'm really all about trying to help facilitate those people out there that are really trying to improve their way they eat, not only for their own health, but for planetary health. But they're kind of stuck in this place where they might not know how to do it. And so all of my work through my Guardian column and cookbooks and any TV that I do is really about kind of communicating those very practical ideas about how we can eat to save the planet.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, at the moment, I'm kind of writing out some ideas for a potential documentary series. And I've based it on my Root to Fruit manifesto, which is this kind of my sustainability philosophy that breaks it down into 12 actionable, really key points, like eat for pleasure, eat whole foods, and eat the best food you can, and then talks in more depth about how we can support biodiversity and all of these different topics that we're discussing in such depth at the moment, like on television already, but without maybe the kind of toolkit that we need to be able to action that in our homes.
Yeah. I mean, having said that, your book and, you know, your audience is very much a millennial audience. Poco, your fantastic restaurant in Bristol, is absolutely it was my last night before lockdown in March. It was full of beautiful people, all the same kind of demographic. There is a question, isn't there, about preaching to the converted, talking to within your bubbles. And what I'm interested in with television is that it does burst that bubble. Once you are out there, and not in documentaries, but actually on Saturday morning with James Martin and on Ready, Steady, Cook, you know, when those messages are actually part of the national conversation, then we can start making a difference. Can you see that? Can you see?
Absolutely. My book, Eating for Pleasure, People and Planet, isn't a bestseller, but it was the day I went on James Martin. Like, it went to #1 on Amazon in food.
Oh, that's
great. And I think everyone is really ready to hear this. I mean, you know, Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall kind of set us up for this, really. Like, he was discussing a lot of what we need to continue to discuss now, but in that much more depth and with a fresh look. And so, yeah, I think people are so ready for it. They're gagging for it, aren't they?
Well, they want answers, don't they? And they want easy answers. And Rukmini has the easiest answers, and we'll come to you soon. But Olia, you have the depth and the stories. I mean, you must giggle when we're talking about fermentation and pickles and chutneys, because that is what you've been about all your life and for generations before you. Let me just give a little bit of background to Olia Hercules. She's a storyteller. Her books, Mamushka, Caucasus and Summer Kitchens, tell the story of her Ukraine through the recipes of her homeland. Nigella calls her a wholly original voice in the kitchen. Her food was dubbed the Wild East, but also has made us rethink what we knew about Ukraine, and that was really important to you at the time of the war. Ukraine and food stories as anthropology is what I really want to discuss with you, Olia. You know, I could see it on television. You are so ripe for television. I can't believe that you're not telling us all about Ukrainian food on television. Tell us what experience you've had with television so far.
So far it's been mostly Saturday Kitchen, a little bit of Sunday Brunch, and all the year, what was it, 2019, we were working on quite a serious kind of pitch for a series, and it quite nearly got somewhere, And then I gave birth, and then the stuff happened. So so that's kind of on pause now, and I don't know what's happening. And to be honest with you, I would really love to tell exactly that. To tell, I don't want to be chopping and chatting on TV necessarily. That doesn't interest me. I would really love to go to Ukraine. I'd love to go to Georgia. I'd love to go to other kind of like, ex-Soviet kind of countries, and to show people the old kind of traditions, and the things that you mentioned that, are perhaps a bit trendy here. I don't giggle, but my family definitely do giggle when I come back and I say fermentacja. They're like, oh, we just call it kwaszenia, which means to make things sour. We didn't know anything about gut health, or it was a necessity, and also something that we love doing. So that kind of the idea for the TV show is on pause right now, and to be honest with you, I still have a 9-month-old baby, so we'll see where we go with that. But at the moment, it's busy life. But there are so many stories to tell.
It's crying out for it. And of course, TV has form for that. We learned about food back in the 80s. We learned about food from other countries, Ken Hom's China, Madhu Jaffrey's India. And it's really important, isn't it, in the push for connecting with our food, to have story, to understand that food isn't just from a supermarket, it has story, and to actually cook it and experiment with it gives us pleasure, it gives depth and roots, and that's what's really important. I just don't know where those programs are. Does anybody see those on television anymore? I mean, I see them on Netflix.
Television, to be honest with you, I haven't actually watched television in a very long time, but I did very much watch television when I came to the UK. So I wasn't, there's a few like truths that I would like to reveal. So when I came here to the UK, I lived in Cyprus for 5 years after Ukraine. So Ukraine for 12 years, then another 5 years in Cyprus. And then I came here to study at University of Warwick when I was 18. I'm 36 now. So whatever year that was, 2003. And I wasn't into cooking, and I didn't even really appreciate the amazing food that I grew up with. I know it sounds really weird, but I wasn't really into cooking. I just ate anything. And then I was studying Italian, so I spent a year in Italy, and that's where I saw young people of my age cook, and with very simple ingredients, but it tasted good. And I was just like, oh, okay, some things kind of started coming together. And I came back to the UK, and I was in my early 20s. And that's when everything was kind of exploding on TV as well here. You had all the programs, the magazines, and I just became obsessed, and I watched everything. And actually, I was thinking about it. I was like, what was one of the programs that I really loved? And it was a bit unassuming, but I think it was Market Kitchen. Do you remember that? I think there was Diana Henry then, maybe Valentine Warner and Matt Tabbitt from time to time, but it was all about market and ingredients. And slowly, I started kind of making connections, because when I got to the UK, I didn't understand even what seasonality and organic food was, even though I grew up with it, if you know what I mean. Because in Ukraine, we didn't have any of these buzzwords. We just did it. We just ate seasonally, and we fermented stuff, but there was no terminology for it.
Yeah.
So when I got here, some of my friends would be a bit like, oh, organic food is just for people with money, or, and that was even way before fermentation even kicked off.
Yeah.
So I never made those connections, and slowly with TV, even though those things weren't necessarily discussed as much as they are now, but programs like Market Kitchen did kind of like stoke the fire and made me more and more passionate about cooking, and then I just couldn't stop cooking.
Interesting. In fact, it was the 90s that in Britain that really started the kind of the best programs in television. Two Fat Ladies, Roads Around Britain. That's when people were really starting to put together where food comes from. And then we got Jamie, then we got Nigella and Gordon and all that lot. And it became sort of, the tribes. Whose tribe were you in? If you were kind of cooking for the lads, you were for Jamie. And if you wanted to do cool dinner parties, you were Nigella. And we kind of lost the plot, I think, around that time. But so TV, too cool for TV, I've got written here, because I remember an Instagram post which you were so cross because you'd been told that you were too cool for TV. What was that?
BBC said, "Oh, we know Olia now. She's too young and too cool." And actually, I was more incensed about the too young situation. I was like, "I am a mother, by the way. You know, I am not too young. I'm a responsible adult, and I've got loads of things to you know, for the world to know and for me to tell." And yeah, that was kind of that was immediately after Mamushka came out in 2015. I think we did pitch a couple of projects to BBC, I think, and yeah, they said, we know of Olia, but she's not right for our demographic or for the audience, whatever. So that kind of got shut down. And then I kind of just sat back, to be honest with you. Everything with my books and everything just happened so organically. Maybe I was lucky, I don't know, but it just happened. I never kind of pursued it. And I thought, well, I'll do the same with this TV stuff, because I'm not, you know, I am burning to tell the stories, but I don't need to be on TV for any personal kind of, that's not my vibe. So I thought, oh, somebody will see that Ukraine is super interesting and they'll just come to me. And then if things happen, then it's just, you know, it will happen. And nothing happened. And then after that initial pitch, no one did come to me, and no one seemed, you know, I don't know if nobody wants to know about East European cuisine, even though it's so interesting. You know, there's a wealth of interesting information. And then suddenly, well, a year and a half ago, there was a production company that came and we started kind of like mulling things over, and we went to Netflix with the project, and they said, oh yeah, like really great, but rethink it. We want this to be kind of like London based, you know, more of a London hub thing. And we're like, oh, and I was, you know, just like, my heart sank. I was like, why can't we just go to Ukraine and make this about Ukraine and its people? And, you know, all of the trendy kind of words, like you can work this into the story of Ukraine, because, you know, it's just something that happens naturally there. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. It's a no-brainer. I think he.
Yeah, so so eventually, like, we did rework the thing. We decided, okay, let's not just make it about Ukraine. Let's get some other female chefs involved. Maybe it will be about the female conversation, which I thought, okay, you know, that'd be interesting. And then they said no eventually. And then BBC kind of were interested, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. They've kind of changed their mind a little bit. And as I say, and then I was heavily pregnant, and I just said, look, I can't do anything right now, so why don't we wait till the summer, and my son is going to be a little bit older, and then we can revisit it. So
yeah. Well, best of luck with it.
Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many stories to tell in the whole of the East, and you're the person to do it, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Romy Gill, now you're a food writer and a chef. Your book Zyka brings the food of your homeland of West Bengal to Britain. You're already on the telly, the revived Ready Steady Cook, pure entertainment for a much wider demographic. But does it teach people to cook? And what does it teach people to cook? Can you fit those conversations in about ethical, highly sourced, high welfare, local sourcing, and all the things that we need to do to save the planet? Tell me which chef influenced you most, first of all, Romy.
I think Olia and myself have a very similar story, because we come from a different country, and like chutneys, pickles, and fermenting, we don't even think, we do it in a sustainable, local, was something in us. We never had to kind of think, oh, we'll have to do it. You know, my mom, if like pomegranates were there, she would dry it, she would make molasses with it, you know, she would make a syrup out of it. So anything like that, we never let it waste. So when I came to UK, like, I don't know, it's been a long time now, I think 93, and I think India is such a vast country. It's such a big country. And when people say Indian food, it's just not Indian food. It's regional food. It's home cooking is so different. You know, everything is so different. And people speak different languages. They look different. And the way of cooking, the techniques are so different. So when I came here, especially the weather was so, you know, you're all excited, you're young, you're excited to come here. And I used to just switch on the television, because at that point we didn't have Netflix or these iPhones or, you know, tablets or anything like that. You had like I think channel 5 came later on as well. I think it was 4 channels, and you watched those 4 channels. And then came Pete Floyd, and Pete Floyd is huge in India. people say he was crazy, but he was great, you know, in his way. And then two fat ladies. And then eventually Jamie and for me, Nigella, you know, all these people, and Delia. My husband still loves Delia's cakes and his books and her books. So I think there were a lot of different influences for me. But I think for me, I was never a food writer. It was Alan and Mina, Alan is the OFM editor and Mina does the Feast of the Guardian. They were the two people who really pushed me to write. And she was one of those people who gave me cook residency. And she said, you have to write it. You've got to write it. It's in you. I said, no, I can't write. I can't. And I think those two people generally pushed me and be able to write. And Alan used to say, even if you're angry in your restaurant or something, come back and write it in the diary and think about it, how you felt, what you felt. You see a leaf on the floor and pick up the leaf and think about it. I think that kind of made me write. And I never was I would say a food or travel writer, but I've started to write a lot. But for me, it was all about the heritage I had, the roots which I brought back from my country, and then from one homeland to another, because this is my homeland now. So I think that I kind of incorporated in my cooking in my restaurant. But for me, it was the huge influence was the two fat ladies and Keith Floyd, because I just loved watching them. Whether, you know, they kind of made me, oh, I can do this.
Well, it's about story, isn't it? Are you able to bring that story to Ready, Steady, Cook, or is it just too fast and too high energy?
You know what, Ready, Steady, Cook, brilliant. It's completely changed from what it used to be. It's very, because we film in Glasgow. So it's filmed in Glasgow studios, and everything sourced is ethically sourced, and everything is local, the fish, all the meat, everything. And I'm really, really proud of being part of that team. We can quickly, you know, if you want to tell a story, we do tell a story and they want to know about it. And also it's kind of a fun program and they want the kids to get involved. You know, when the kids used to come half full, people, you know, kids would love watching that. I think that's what they want the kids to get involved and start cooking. I think it's a brilliant program. It's something very fun. And also what you can create in that 20 minutes. I sometimes think, wow, I did that in 20 minutes, you know, and I think, oh, I can do this. I'm good at it. So, and also you learn from all those 4 chefs.
Yeah, it is an absolutely amazing platform. And I think it's probably very, very important, actually. But can you tell those stories of the local sourcing? I mean, can you, one of the queen of lifestyle television, Jane Root, who was one of the main interviewees in the book, she created the platform for Jamie Oliver. She encouraged Pat Llewellyn to go out and find somebody like Jamie. She changed food from Delia's education to food as delight. And it was her word, delight. And she now says that the programs that she makes now, she drops those messages in, but it's within a delightful environment. It's still really important, ethical messaging, but she drops them in so they don't become preachy. Can you do that, or can you actually kind of do it with a bit more of a sledgehammer?
I think in Ready Steady, you can do it when they ask you. It's up to you how you would. BBC's never told us that we can't do it. We have to, where the fish has come from or where the vegetables come from. It's very important to tell a story. But because I've been really, really lucky that I have been with James Martin quite a lot. Like, you know, me and Tom were together back in January, we were filming. I've been on James Martin like 12, 13 times now. And then I did, you know, Sunday Brunch. I've been on BBC One show with Mary Bede, you know, I've been on MasterChef as well. So I think even if I can't tell a story in Ready Steady, I have told a story in other ways in different programs. So I think for me, it's very important to tell a story because my daughters are born here, but my heritage is something very different. And I want to talk about it, you know, like, you know, I love Tom to bits and his restaurant's down the road, it's not far. But for me, it's really, really important that people are talking about local, sustainable, ethical. This is what we did back in India. This was nothing new for me. So I always like, you know, if I'm going to even make a samosa, I did a video yesterday on Instagram, samosa. It's just quick story that how my grandma did. And that's the one thing I learned from her. And I wanted to share that with people. I think you have to tell a story is very important. That's why I love Olia's books, because I just think that is something she writes beautifully, but also tells a really, really amazing story. And Caucasus is one of my favorite books. I mean, Mamushka is brilliant, and the Summer Kitchen is absolutely, but Caucasus, I think I love that book. And because if you haven't, you must read it. It's beautiful, the journey, all the different kind of, you know, the way she talks about it. I wish I could write like her. I can't write like Olia. Maybe one day. But for me, I like travel writing. So food and travel writing, I do for New York Times, because I've written a few articles for them and they've given me more, but at the moment travel is stopped. So I think for me, telling a story is through travel and food. That's what I always want to do.
So that's what you would do if a commissioning editor came up to you and said, Romy, you've got the keys to the door. What do you want to do?
So I don't know if you know, we created this, something we haven't done for a couple of years, because the last year, it went crazy, and this year as well, is Seven Sisters. I created this something called Seven Sisters, and it's River Seven, not Seven Sisters, which Olia was also part, and Rosie and loads of other people are part of it. I want to kind of take those women, go back to, you know, I have been in talks and I've just been so busy, and we don't want to kind of focus too much on other things, is take like Olia or, all these women who are food writers or chefs, go to their country they were born and tell a story there, and then come back, and all the women again cook like we do the Seven Sisters feast. So it's like going to their country, back to the roots, and then bringing back all together and do a feast together. So I really want to do, why is it that, there are so many men on television together, driving here, driving there, why can't women do it? So for me, it's all about women. I want to push more women. I want to do that. It's not something that I'm very much a feminist, but also I want to the women tell a story really, really amazingly well. I hope it doesn't have to be BBC. It doesn't have to be any, it can be any channel. So who wants me?
Yes, I mean, as somebody who is on BBC, could you imagine, being anywhere else? What do you watch? Do you watch Netflix more than telly?
I don't really watch it.
I mean, who watches telly anymore?
If I do, my daughters are watching. They're teenagers. They watch Netflix, But they also really like to listen to me on radio, because I do food program with Sheila Dillon. They love me on radio, because I think radio is something you can tell and people don't see you, and you can do that. But I just think that sometimes with BBC or any kind of commissioner from any channels, they just want to have the popular people, or they think they're very safe with, let's say, I don't want to take anybody's name, or safe with this person, we'll just go with this person. I think it's unfair. It's really unfair, because all of us has a story. We all have a different way of telling it. And I think commissioners should understand, take that risk, because we can tell a story, a really beautiful story, where we come from, and create something beautiful. I hope commissioners will listen and create Seven Sisters.
Well, let's make sure that they're watching this after it's finished. Thank you very much, Romy. Rukmini, let's move to you. You are the 5th best-selling food writer in the UK. You're reaching 500,000 people through your books. That is quite phenomenal in terms of food books. Your Roasting Tin series has done just extraordinarily well. We talked very recently, I think you were on last week's Cooking the Books podcast, and I suggested that it was actually about making very simple recipes just really exciting. What do you think the secret of your success is in getting it out to so many people?
I mean, I would agree with that. I think in a way, I completely, with everyone who we've talked to so far, James, Tom, Olia, Romy, about sustainability, about using really good ingredients, local ingredients and seasonal ones. And that is definitely what I would do in my own kitchen. But I also think, if I'm thinking about the audience, I'm thinking about like your busy mum or your busy dad. You've literally not got time between feeding the kids and holding down a job, and really it's sort of that incremental improvement in your dinner. So on a Wednesday night, you don't have much confidence in the kitchen, and instead of grabbing a takeaway or a ready meal, the idea with the tin books was like, look, it's literally hardly any more effort than putting a ready meal in the oven. Chop something for 5 minutes, shove it in the oven. And like you were saying with your friend who's a commissioner, that delight, like I made this, So I think it's breaking it down to something that's so much more on the kind of maybe the thin end of the wedge. Like if I can do this and it's delicious, then, you know, next time I'll try something a bit more exciting. I'll try one of the Thai recipes, or I'll try one of the African recipes in the book.
Oh.
And you slowly build your confidence that way. And yeah, you slip in messages. No one's ever commented in my books, but I never write eggs without writing free range. I never write sausages without writing free range, or chicken without writing free range. I think it's quite hard to make lamb not free range, as far as I know. So I don't bother with that.
Exactly.
But yeah, intensively farming lamb is probably not really a thing. But I think so. The message goes in a really subtle way, and hopefully you're building to the point when someone thinks, oh, do you know what? I want to know more about where this tomato comes from. And I think that's a baton that's picked up by chefs who know a lot more about it than me. And I would just hope I inspired people on a much simpler level, just to get into food and just get into kind of almost going from zero to like, I don't cook at all, to, oh, now I cook. And from there, you're like, well, now I'm interested in where my food comes from.
Yes, exactly. And it's the narrative of the time poor, as we talked about on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I talked to you then about how extraordinary in terms of timing, because we're talking post-lockdown, when we had the most amazing amount of time suddenly delivered to us. And we were talking about a book that was, as you say, for people who are really busy and just don't have time and will very possibly buy one of these kit boxes I tried out recently just for the hell of it, and I couldn't believe how much plastic there was in it. You know, what you're saying is people who need to cook, well, everyone needs to cook because we actually need to save on waste, but you're making it just incredibly easy for people. I wonder on television where that sits, and I'm thinking of something like Tom Kerridge, and his shtick will be about making you lose weight, for example. So taking those time poor people, showing them how to cook really easy, simple recipes that are actually quite delicious. But there's no messaging about, you know, free range this, or don't buy stuff in plastic, or, you know, try and source it locally, go to your local farm shop, get a veg box in, or anything like that. What do you feel when you watch those programs? Because that's the message you're delivering, isn't it, about the kind of the easy, simple cooking?
Well, I know there's I think a little bit like what Olia said earlier about people think, oh, organic, it's really expensive. I really think if you're at a sort of basic level of people who really don't have very much cash at all, and it's sort of an option between getting your sort of cheapest supermarket frozen meals or making something from scratch from some vegetables from Asda, I feel like we're all quite privileged in a way to be able to make those choices for ourselves, because it does, to a certain extent, depending on where you are in the country, it does require money. I mean, I couldn't name a farm shop near me, and I shop at Waitrose, but if I'm in the mood, I'll go and shop at Borough Market and, you know, go and get some lovely heritage produce. But even though I know I should do better, I'm going to say lazy in terms of time poor. So the easiest option is to go to the supermarket, whichever one it is. And I think I know it's not really the mindset. I guess lazy is a little bit harsh, but I think it's, if I, with my knowledge and interest in food, can't quite always bring myself to, and also, you know, it is pricey, I can really understand how people who are just not that well off aren't able to make those choices. And I would always be wary. I know Twitter is a very divisive place, but you do see quite significant sort of Twitter spats from people who are just like, well, if you eat trans fats, you're basically a terrible human being. And you're like, if you eat a biscuit, you're killing the planet. It's like, do you know what? Like, maybe someone really needs a biscuit. Maybe you should chill out. And they couldn't make their own oat cookies, but it's brought them a moment of happiness, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you can be so prescriptive with people when, I mean, look at like poverty in this country. It's terrible. So if someone could just make themselves a meal from scratch, I don't think I would be judgmental about whether they got their ingredients from Asda or somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Asda's actually brilliant for buying vegetables now. They don't use very much plastic. They were the first to use MSC fish, as far as I remember. So don't knock Asda. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, your perfect television programme. You've got the commissioning editors have given you the key to the doors now. What would you like to do with your television programme?
Oh, well, I like Romy's idea about telling stories. And I think if you talk to people about what their mother's favorite dishes were, or what's their go-to dish, or maybe some kind of supermarket sweep. I loved, I think Tommy Myers did a program a while ago when she taught students how to cook by saying, we're just going to cook with what's in your fridge. And for me, that was revolutionary, because I thought cooking was going to your cookbooks, going to the supermarket, buying tons of things and a bottle of walnut oil you're never going to use again. And her program was just open the fridge. You can make anything you want from what's in there. And these students were like, we don't know how to cook. But they were making extraordinary dinners because someone had bought a few aubergines and someone had bought a chicken. And I like that idea of cobbling together something from what you've got and showing people how easy that is.
Yeah, yeah. Brilliant. Well, that is Ready, Steady, Cook, it has to be said. It's what Melissa Hemsley does every day on her Instagram as well. Plenty of programmes there. I'm going to open it up now. I wonder if I can do that too in the gallery. Hello, everybody. Right, your chance, lovely audience, to ask some questions. Now, have we got Kevin? I don't know if we've got Kevin in here. He was supposed to come back. He's written a book about Fanny Craddock. Who'd like to ask the panel some questions? Anybody like to ask the panel some questions? What about the ideas of the programmes that they have put forward? Would you watch any of them? I can't even see people. I can see names. This is the problem with Zoom, isn't it? Okay, well, we're going to go back to them. So, okay, so TV chef now. Oh, sorry, who's asking? Yanis. Yes.
You were talking earlier about positive storytelling. And just wanted to ask the panel if they think there has been some negative storytelling or negative images from celebrity chefs over the years that haven't really helped build either food or hospitality in the minds of the general public.
James has an answer.
Yeah, hand up there. I think something my dad taught me, which is interesting, is convincing people by stealth, as in not getting preachy on a soapbox. And I think sometimes campaign TV, which focuses on a serious matter, it slightly preaches to the converted. So sometimes loads of people will feel very self-righteous, and they'll buy free range eggs, but they'll still buy battery farmed caged chicken. And then that fades, and the next thing is fish, and then the next thing a few years later is packaging or whatever it may be. And I feel sometimes it's sad that, and my dad was particularly good at this when I was doing TV back with him, and a bit like the lower income, low poverty, sort of time poverty, like all you want is to feel good in a miserable sort of economic and social climate at the moment. So I think sometimes positive showing by example rather than just preaching, and I think it's a tough landscape to navigate. But I think if you can make people feel good about the changes that have positive impacts on the environment, that's a really interesting approach. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Anybody else got any examples of bad use of television in terms of food? I really think that we should be having a whole glut of stuff on resilience. I think that, really growing. Now is the time when how long is COVID going to last? We do have time right now, and people can grow and start putting some really understanding about growing your own produce, so that you connect with the land, and then you start cooking with, it worked with baking, so why not with growing? Anybody else want to ask any questions before we let these lovely
questions just come in from Deborah on the chat?
Oh, well done. How did you see that one? Oh, hello. Thank you. And Yanis says, Hugh Valley Whittingstall does some cool positive storytelling, but I'm not sure if they're reruns yet. Deborah says, experience from doing voluntary work, cooking sessions with low-income families. Food insecurity is set to worsen. Absolutely. Low literacy can be a problem, but enthusiasm to cook is positive. People without finances need lots of help. Yeah, absolutely. One of the podcasts I do, Right to Food podcast for the Food Foundation, I'm doing food banks all the time. Actually, they're incredibly uplifting stories about what happens when you do join a food bank or a food club, for the people on the lowest incomes, and there's masses of help available, as well as incredible food from FareShare. Who was talking about FareShare earlier? Somebody was talking about, Tom, it was you, wasn't it? Did you do a program with FareShare?
Not a program. I turned their warehouse into a restaurant and created a big kind of pop-up. Channel 4 News did come down. It was really fun. And yeah, I mean, talking a little bit about, well, obviously we're talking a lot about people in poverty in Britain and how all of the you know, TV needs to be accessible and all of these ideas around kind of in climate cuisine. But I think that's, for me, kind of why food waste as a topic is such a brilliant gateway to discuss these issues, because we're all, you know, going to save the environment and money by practicing that. And that leads to the broader conversation around why we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Deborah also says some TV programs on cooking and weight loss cause problems. Read eating disorders. That's an interesting one. Anybody got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think I could probably jump in a little bit on that. I think I don't think you'd want to sensationalize a show. As I understand what Deborah is saying, the reverse of that would be a sort of, right, well, here's a show to eat to get out of an eating disorder, which I think is maybe a little bit sensationalist. But I agree that positive programming about like just the joys of food, and in a way writing, there are like Ruby Tando, there are so many writers who kind of are just you know, about enjoying the food that you eat. And I guess positive programming again about joy. I don't think we have too many dieting programs. I'm, again, like the rest of the panel, I'm mostly a Netflix kind of gal at the moment. Yeah. But I would agree, anything that's about aggressive dieting is probably not going to be super helpful for people who have issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Katerina says, shows where you learn culture through recipes are the way to go. Absolutely. Culture brings knowledge, and through knowledge you open consciousness. Says Massimo Bottura, consciousness gives you a sense of responsibility. Yes, I think he said that very many times on the interviews I've done with Massimo and everyone else. No, absolutely, it does. And a wide array of these food programs, I think, is where television has gone wrong. We've stopped seeing the anthropological programs. I don't see those anymore. I think that's why people have kind of gone away from those television programs. It's all kind of TV food is entertainment rather than delight. Thank you, panel. You've been absolutely marvellous. I really want to see all those programmes on television. James, I'm really looking forward to seeing yours. I'm willing it to be commissioned. Olia, yours too. I think that it's terribly important to actually, you know, to really see the depth and the roots of food. I think that those things are so important. And Romy, yours would absolutely tell those stories too. So more than 7, please. Get it going as a series. Panel, thank you very much. Thank you, audience, for being lovely. And I have recorded this, and it will be, I will share the link. It'll be on my website, gilliesmith.com, as soon as I work out how to do it. Thank you very much, everybody, and see you soon. Lovely. I'm going to end the meeting now.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.